All right, well, turnout is strong in New Hampshire. Right now, voters are continuing heading to the polls at this hour. Welcome to our special coverage, the New Hampshire primary. I'm Erin Burnett in Washington.
And I'm Wolf Blitzer in New York. The New Hampshire Secretary of State saying there could be record turnout today in what is now a two-person race, Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley.
And Haley is the clear underdog tonight. She has staked her entire campaign, though, Wolf, as we know, on a strong finish in New Hampshire. She's trying to make the case that she can defeat Trump and win in the general election. Today, telling reporters that she is in this for the long haul.
This has always been a marathon. It's never been a sprint. We want to be strong in Iowa. We want to be stronger than that in New Hampshire. We're going to be even stronger than that in South Carolina. We're running the tape.
Meanwhile, Trump telling reporters that even if he is able to secure a decisive victory tonight, he will not ask Nikki Haley to exit the race, Wolf. And of course, we're going to be getting some early clues about what's been happening. We talked about turnout looking very strong, but in about an hour from now, Wolf, we're going to get those first exit poll results, and that could tell us a lot.
Certainly could. We have our reporters, Aaron, fanned out all across New Hampshire as voters are heading to the polls. Our Jeff Zeleny is covering all angles of today's primaries for us. He's joining us live from Manchester right now. So what's happening, Jeff? What are you seeing? What are you hearing on the ground?
Well, if the campaigns are furiously trying to turn out their supporters, sending text messages, making telephone calls, urging people to stop at their polling places on the way home from work if they haven't voted already. And Republican officials on both sides are saying that a high turnout, they believe, could benefit Nikki Haley. They are anecdotal reports of high turnout. We will see how the next few hours remain here. But, Wolf, there is no doubt Donald Trump is trying to do what no modern-day candidate has done, win the Iowa caucuses in a landslide and deliver a knockout victory in New Hampshire. We will see if he accomplishes that this evening. Of course, this is now a two-person race, something that Nikki Haley has long wanted, long hoped for. Now she has it. The question is, how long will this remain a two-person race? She, though, is saying she's going to go on. She's scheduled a rally tomorrow evening in South Carolina. But for now, her campaign is focusing on those undeclared voters here in New Hampshire, the voters that make so much of the difference. They make up 40% of the electorate. So they walked into polling places today. You can choose a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot. Many of them have chosen Republican ballots. Of course, they are running essentially against the registered Republicans who are more likely to support the former president. So if you can feel the tension here, this could either begin a long chapter of the race going forward, or it could perhaps make this one of the fastest primary races in history. There's not been a general election start in the 2004 campaign. It basically started in March 3rd. If he delivers a big win tonight, it could effectively start tonight here with a rematch with Joe Biden. But Nikki Haley, her supporters believe that she will do very well here. And she said she does not have to win. She just needs to do stronger than Iowa. The question is what exactly that margin will be. But for now, at least, the poll's open for at least 3 more hours in most of the state, even longer in some other parts of the state here. So the voting is still underway, Wolf.
These next few hours will be so dramatic. Jeff Zeleny, thank you very much. I want to bring in CNN's Sarah Seidner right now. She's over at a polling center in Concord, New Hampshire. Sarah, I know you've been talking to voters where you are. What are they telling you?
Look, we're about 30 minutes away from where Jeff Zeleny is. There's been a steady stream of people coming through, although up until about lunchtime, the folks here that are looking at the count say the numbers aren't as high as they thought they might be. But we'll have to, of course, wait to the end of the night. But we have been talking to different voters who have been coming through here, and there is a theme going on here. Those who talk to us seem to be really pulling for Nikki Haley. Take a listen.
I actually voted for Nikki. I really didn't, Trump's had some good stuff, but he's got too much baggage, so I didn't go with Trump. I almost voted Biden, but I'm a Republican.
Now, you heard that there. I mean, quite unusual. This is a person who says, look, he is a Republican voter, but he almost wrote in Joe Biden for president because he was so disturbed by some of the actions of Donald Trump and decided in the end to go with Nikki Haley. We've heard the word bully a couple of times from voters who said that they just couldn't bring themselves to vote again for Donald Trump and that they were going to vote for Nikki Haley. This is going to make, of course, the Haley campaign very happy, but you got to look at the numbers in the end, right? You got to look at every everything in totality. The other thing that they do here that is really quite cool is at this gymnasium at school here, every time there is a voter who registers to vote and who votes for the first time, they ring a cowbell. We've heard that cowbell ring in the last 20 minutes or so. So there are new voters who are coming out to take part in this primary. Aaron?
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. And of course, you know, those people registering day of, we'll see what sort of a role they play. And maybe we'll find some of that out in some of these exit polls as we start to get them over this next hour or two. All right, so I'm here with everyone to talk about this. Jamie, you talk to your sources in these campaigns regularly, but in the Haley campaign, what are they telling you tonight?
They keep asking me what time do the exit polls come in. Because at the end of the day, this is about the numbers. Honestly, they don't expect to win here, so it's about the margin. And Nikki Haley can say, as we just reported, I'm not going anywhere. Right. And maybe if it's below 10 points, she's not going anywhere. But the sources I speak to on her campaign are waiting to see, is this a small margin or if it's a big margin? And as one said to me, if it is a big margin, what is her realistic path? She does not want to get pummeled in her home state of South Carolina. Money will dry up. Everyone in politics is in the race until they're not in the race.
And to this point about margins, Gloria, and you were just hearing this, you know, from Sarah as well. The margin in Iowa, she says she's going to do better than Iowa. Okay.
Well, that's kind of a low bar.
I was just making sure, you know. Yeah. PTSD from that night.
Yeah.
Okay, 51% Trump had 19% for Haley. So that's 32 points back.
Right.
So she
Low
darn
bar.
well better do better than she did in Iowa. But that is the point, right? All joking aside, it's how close does it need to be for her to justify to herself?
I think single digits, you know, if she could break into the single digits, that would obviously be good for her. Her campaign manager put out a memo today saying, you know, look at all of these open primaries that are on Super Tuesday. 11 out of the 16 are open. We're not giving up. Michigan is open. We can...
Meaning those independents can play.
The independent, you know, she's playing for those independents, and they can vote in those primaries, so this wouldn't be the end of the road. But I think that, you know, as Jamie was saying, they're realistic, too, because they need money. And money can dry up very, very quickly. And what's interesting to me about this race is that Donald Trump is being treated like the incumbent. He is the incumbent here. And people are either voting for him or not voting for him because they don't like him. They know who he is. They know his record. And it's all about him. It's not about Nikki Haley, you know, because she didn't make it about Donald Trump enough at the beginning. She is now, but she didn't do it early on.
I was texting with some folks in South Carolina, and they, too, are very much watching New Hampshire to see what the margins are. I was asking, you know, what do they think the sort of most they can expect from Nikki Haley in South Carolina, you know, 40s, mid-40s, maybe a ceiling of something like 47, but it all depends on how she does tonight.
Right.
Can she keep it within 10 points or so? And, you know, at that point, she'll have to make some decisions. But it does seem like, in listening to the voter there, Nikki Haley is like, you know, a placeholder for those dissatisfied Trump voters who are really deeply disaffected by Donald Trump. You know, they're sort of morally opposed to him at this point. And you hear some of those folks, I was listening to a focus group, some of those folks say they're going to the polls to vote for Haley, but then intend to vote for Biden in the general election. That gentleman who was in New Hampshire sounded like a lot of the voters I've been hearing from. So it's a really interesting dynamic. We'll see what the exit polls say. Obviously, the Nikki Haley campaign wants to see the same thing.
They want to have an alternative.
$4 million ad buy, though, already in South Carolina. Now, as you say, you can, you know, burn money if you want to burn money and get out of the race the next day. It doesn't mean anything unless it does.
Well, she has the money now, and they need to portray strength now, right? There's no benefit to her campaign saying, if we don't do well in New Hampshire, we're getting out of here. They have to say we're going to stick around, right? And I do think that, you know, texting with people who are, you know, Republican strategist donors who are supportive of her, they want her to stick it out. They want, you know, she's the last best hope to stop Donald Trump if you are an anti-Trump Republican. But they're also realistic. And what I've heard the same numbers. I've heard if it's not within 4, 5, 6 points, I don't really see the path. That doesn't mean they won't hope that she'll stick around to try to make the case and hope for a miracle, but it would be a miracle.
Well, so Jamie, I just want to play something because she gave an interview today to Dana.
Yes.
Dana's there, and it was so insightful because, you remember the whole chaos follows him, sort of passive voice that was used by Nikki Haley and never going after Trump. And then that's changed. She did. And then she did this interview with Dana today, and I want everyone to hear this part.
I think that he's fit, but what I'm saying is, do we really want two 80-year-olds to be our options when we're talking about president? What I'm saying is, you can't say that when you're 80 that you're not in decline. Scientifically, you are in decline, no matter who you are. Yeah, I think he's fit. You can see that he's out there. He's, mentally. I mean, look, we've seen him get confused.
He was found liable in a civil trial for sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll. He's under investigation for obstructing attempts to get him to return classified documents that he took from the White House. He's arguing constantly that he deserves total immunity. You think that that conduct makes him fit to be president?
If I did, I wouldn't be running.
Right. So she's clear and she's not clear, and
it's right. So this is what, except for Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie and Liz Cheney, this is the problem. This is the straddling they're doing. What's interesting is, yes, the last couple of days, oh, he's so confused. No, I'm not Nancy Pelosi. And as we saw there, but when push comes to shove, she says he's fit to be president over and over and over again. And what that means is, as one source on the campaign said to me, it sounds like she's leaning toward an endorsement if and when she gets out.
Well, she did raise her hand in that debate and said that she would support him, so...
Because she wants a future in the Republican Party. She's got to return home to South Carolina, which is Trump country, so it makes sense for her.
All right, well, you all stay with me as this conversation continues. Our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary election continues. John King is standing by at the Magic Wall, to break down where Nikki Haley's support is the strongest in New Hampshire and what that actually could mean for what we'll see tonight. And live pictures out of Virginia. That is where President Biden is hitting the trail with Vice President Harris. This is the first campaign event for them together this year. They look eager to take on Trump. All right, welcome back to our special coverage of the New Hampshire first in the nation presidential primary and a potentially defining night in the fight for the Republican nomination. But right now, on the screen, you are looking at Manchester, voters there casting their ballots. Now, the chairman of the New Hampshire Republican Party is predicting record turnout today. That's meaningful. We don't know what it means, but it's meaningful. And in less than an hour, the first exit poll data will give us a sense of what that means, what voters are thinking in a state that does have a history of election night surprises. So John King is here with me at the Magic Wall. So obviously the intense pressure on Nikki Haley. They're looking at record turnout. Does that mean, good things for her or not? What are they watching?
It means she's not going to win 6-0, Aaron.
I should say this is not a mistake. This is
that's
the current status of the race.
That's Dixville Notch. They voted midnight as tradition. The winner of Dixville Notch often does not go on to carry the state. But if you're Nikki Haley, you like the map right now. You have 100% of the vote. What is she looking for tonight? So you just said the chairman says we're going to have record polling, right? So the question is, this is from our poll. Who are those people? When they're asked on the way out in the exit polls, are you a moderate, you a conservative, right? Are you a Democrat, Republican, Independent, right? She wants a more moderate electorate. This is from our poll. Among New Hampshire voters who are going to likely to vote in the primary, who describe themselves as moderate, she gets 71% to 22%. So she wants a flood of moderates to the polls, because if they are conservatives, of those who identify as conservatives, 71% of them say they're going to vote for Donald Trump, only 17% for Nikki Haley. So we're talking about big turnout. That's great. If democracy is bringing people out to vote, no matter who they are, that is great. The question for her is, what's the composition of the electorate?
Now, Sarah Seidner was talking about these cowbells that they're ringing whenever someone votes, saying, I'm the first time doing this. Okay, now, just because you're a new registrant does not mean that you're going to be an independent or for Nikki Haley. I understand that. But it does raise the question about independence. And everyone said this is so important in any race in New Hampshire, but specifically for her.
Right, again, and it's a fascinating question. And again, Trump critics don't like this, but Donald Trump does have a history of bringing a lot of new people out to the polls. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, more voters is a good thing. But back to your point, undeclared is what they call independents in New Hampshire. You are undeclared, meaning you're not declared as a Republican or a Democrat. Undeclared voters can vote tonight. There are more of them in the state of New Hampshire than there are Republicans or Democrats. It's a more live free or die is the motto, more libertarian. A lot of people rejecting both parties right now. They like to declare themselves as independent. The truth is most independents mostly pick one of the parties, but Nikki Haley wants people who don't want to be Republicans because they don't like Trump, so they're undeclared, but they're Republican-leaning independents. Again, she wants moderates to vote, and she hopes that number is as high as possible because she does better with independents than she does with Republicans.
All right, so play this hypothetical out. She doesn't do amazingly well tonight, but she's not out. But what is her map from here? We hear about South Carolina, closed primary, only Republicans, a lot of Republican base. But then they say, oh, but on Super Tuesday, you've got all these other open primaries. Again, the independents factor in. What is the path?
The problem is she needs to come out of New Hampshire with momentum. I don't think a split's enough because what is the path? Where do you go? You go next out to Nevada. Now, there's both a primary and caucuses. She may well win the primary. Guess what? No delegates. They are decided in the caucuses, the Nevada caucuses. Donald Trump has a pretty firm grip on the Nevada Republican Party. He's going to get the bulk, if not all, of the delegates out of the caucuses. Then, yes, you do go to Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina. She's losing there at the moment. If she won New Hampshire, that might shake it up. They might get a little hometown loyalty there. But if she comes out in a split, does it do that? That's a closed Republican primary. Then we go to Michigan, one of the states where Trump's election lying, election denial runs really deep in the bloodstream of Republicans in the state of Michigan. That's a Trump state. So Nikki Haley's, without momentum, really tough, minus a win here. Near impossible. Then you go to Super Tuesday. Yes, there's a lot of states then, but guess what? Most of them in the South. A lot of them are Trump states.
Right. And once you've had, you end up with self-fulfilling prophecies. You need this. Yes. All right. And that is why all eyes are on tonight. We'll be back with John in just a few moments. But let me just show you those live pictures out of Virginia, because as I mentioned, this is also day one for President Biden and Vice President Harris, choosing tonight to kick off their campaign together, what they believe could be the unofficial start of the general election. So what is their game plan? Part of it you see right in front of your eyes, Restore Roe, and we do have some new reporting next. Plus, we'll take you back live to the ground in New Hampshire to hear from the voters about who they're backing in tonight's crucial contest. Our reporters are in all of those voting areas. And welcome back to our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary election. We're going to be checking back in with voters in just a moment as officials predict record turnout there tonight. But first, on this pivotal day for Republicans, President Biden and Vice President Harris are trying to seize this moment. They are appearing together for the first time of the 2024 campaign. Right now, moments away from taking the stage in Virginia. That's where MJ Lee is, of course. And MJ, Biden, they see this as maybe the night this becomes a general election. At least that's how they seem to be handling it. And Biden wants to take attention away from Trump and the GOP, it looks like.
Yeah, that's right, Aaron. And I am going to speak a little bit softly just to be sensitive to the programming that is getting underway now. But no question that this is the counter programming that the Biden campaign is offering tonight as they want to make clear that President Biden is not on the ballot in New Hampshire, is not competing in that state. There are no delegates up for states. But again, we're seeing the campaign focus on this issue of reproductive rights, which they very much expect and hope, they say, will be a hugely mobilizing issue heading into November 2024. There's no question that the Biden campaign, though, even though they are focused here with this event in Virginia, they are watching the Republican race, the Republican primary in New Hampshire very, very closely. As you said, the Biden campaign knows that this could end up being the night that sort of unofficially begins the general election. It obviously depends largely on whether Nikki Haley ends up having a very strong showing. Now, Biden campaign officials and allies and other Democrats that we have spoken to, many of them said that they're sort of eager, they're impatient, they're antsy for the general election to sort of get going already. They believe that that is going to sort of jolt the voters that are not paying attention yet to the realization and the reality. And I should make clear, this is the reality based on the Biden campaign's thinking that this is going to be a race that comes down to Biden and Trump when it comes to November. So this is something that they're watching very closely. But for now, all eyes are on this event and the issue of reproductive rights that, again, they believe will be central to the 2024 election. Wolf, back to you.
Yes, they certainly do. MJ Lee reporting from Manassas, Virginia for us. Thanks, MJ, very much. And as the president takes the stage in Virginia, voters are casting their ballots in New Hampshire. But in New Hampshire, President Biden's name doesn't show up on the ballot at all. CNN's Brian Todd is over at the Magic Wall. Brian, the primary process not as cut and dry on the Democratic side. Walk us through it.
Wolf, the New Hampshire primary on the Democratic side is, let's just say, an interesting process this year. You've got basically first President Biden, who's all but guaranteed to be the Democratic nominee for president. He's not even on the ballot in New Hampshire because of an internal party dispute over the date of the primary. The president is a write-in candidate in New Hampshire. There are other names who are on the ballot, including Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips and author Marianne Williamson. All in all, you've got 21 names on the Democratic ballot. And there's a space for writing in names at the bottom right there. In addition to the potential for Phillips and Williamson to take votes away from the president, there's also been a last-minute effort to encourage voters to write in phrases in this space here, to write in phrases like ceasefire as a protest against the president from the pro-Palestinian wing of the Democratic Party. Now, the danger for President Biden here is that basically New Hampshire could be an embarrassing showing for him. If there is an embarrassing showing for him, like if he gets less than 50% of the vote, that's going to spark a new round of doubts about the president's overall political strength and his chances of beating Donald Trump in November. Now, in a CNN poll last week, here's what the numbers showed. The president, again, as a write-in candidate, he got 63% support. Dean Phillips got 10% and Marianne Williamson got 9%. But Joe Biden, well, you know what? He doesn't have a great history recently in New Hampshire. In 2020, he basically got crushed, finishing in 5th place with only 8.4% of the vote. This time, to make matters worse, even more fraught for the president in the Granite State, there is a robocall that's been circulating with a fake Joe Biden voice, which appears to be generated by AI, that's been reaching out to New Hampshire residents, appealing to them not to vote in today's primary and to save their votes for the November election. Take a listen.
Republicans have been trying to push nonpartisan and Democratic voters to participate in their primary. What a bunch of malarkey. It's important that you save your vote for the November election. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
Now, it's unclear who's behind that robocall. The Biden campaign says the matter has been referred to New Hampshire's Attorney General. Wolf?
Interesting indeed. Brian Todd reporting for us. Thanks very much, Brian. Let's bring in our panel. And Ashley Allison, let me ask you, you just heard Brian. Are you worried that President Biden could wind up with less than 50% of the vote tonight?
I don't think it matters one way or the other. There's no delegates at stake. And the party has the right to decide which state goes first. And the Democratic Party decided they were going to go to South Carolina for a couple of reasons, but most importantly because it is more representative of the country. And it also speaks to the base that has been loyal to the Democratic Party, African-American voters. And so that is where the race for the Democratic nominee takes place. So honestly, he's not on the ballot. It doesn't really matter. I respect the New Hampshire party if they wanted to continue on with this exercise, but it is not determinative of what is going to happen in the Democratic nomination party.
Jamal, let me get you involved in this as well. I want you to listen to something that Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips, who's challenging, as you know, President Biden, said earlier today. Listen to this.
Gretchen Whitmer, J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, Vice President Harris. Where are you? I think she should enter the race and be assessed. Yeah, but in the absence,
she's qualified. I mean,
it's not my place. It's not my place. Every experience I've had with the Vice President has been, I think, quite impressive. But that's the whole point. What the President is doing right now is what Democrats have done for generations. They stick around too long.
What do you think?
I think that Vice President Harris said what she believes last night to Laura Coates. I love my job, I think was her quote. So she likes being vice president. I think she'll stay on the ticket with Joe Biden. Listen, if you're Dean Phillips, you're going to have a reckoning probably coming, because depending on what happens today, if he is beaten by Joe Biden, who is not competing in New Hampshire, right, he could be beaten by somebody who's not even running. And that says to me, how far should he keep this campaign going might just be a little quixotic for him. Listen, what's happening today on the Republican side is where all the action is, and I think Democrats are very focused on this. You see the president and the vice president right now down there in Virginia. They are focused on what's happening in the fall and the fact that they're talking particularly to women across the country and the men who care about them, about the fact that the Republicans, Donald Trump, has taken away the right for women to have reproductive choice about their lives and abortion.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge issue, and they're really using that issue, the Democrats, as we all know. Let's go to the Republican side, Jeff, and talk a little bit about Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. Do you think she could potentially win tonight?
Yeah, she certainly has a better chance than she did in Iowa. To me, this is all about turnout, and specifically in the turnout, which independents show up and what are those hotbeds. Because I think New Hampshire is more of a proxy on what the national vote's going to look like in the general election, as opposed to what Iowa was. And this is really going to shift to the suburbs. Who can win the suburbs? And for now, for the last few cycles, Donald Trump's been kryptonite for those suburbs. I mean, if we skate to where the puck's going in November, we know that there's just a handful of states that are going to actually matter. And then there's certain areas in those states. I mean, I can point to you in Atlanta, Georgia, exactly what the eyebrow on North Atlanta looks like. There's probably 50 neighborhoods that are going to determine how Georgia goes. And so this is more of a proxy, and I think, obviously, Nikki Haley fares better with the suburbs as far as Republicans.
Kristen Soltis-Anderson is with us as well. Haley says no matter what happens tonight, she's heading to South Carolina. That's her home state. Is it realistic? What do you think, that she potentially could beat Trump?
She has to win tonight. I know their campaign is trying very hard to lower the bar, say she can, if she just comes close. But the reality is the type of voter in the Republican Party that Nikki Haley does best with, there's a lot of them that are able to participate in tonight's primary in New Hampshire. There are fewer of them that can participate in South Carolina. And so if she does not come out of tonight with a lot of momentum, it may well be that this is the coronation of Donald Trump as of this evening.
Well, Ashley, even if she does win in New Hampshire tonight, we have no idea what's going to happen, or she even finishes a very close second. Would this simply be prolonging this fight because everybody anticipates in the end it will be Trump and Biden?
That is everyone's anticipation, but here's what I will say. I want democracy to play out, and I think that's really important, particularly right now for the Republican Party. I think Nikki Haley has to win tonight to continue the race. I agree with you. But I don't think she should drop out if she does win. I mean, the road to the nomination is still an extremely steep mountain. But if she wins, history has shown us that there's a strong chance, we have a better chance of becoming the Republican nominee if you win New Hampshire than if you win Iowa. But we cannot forget the strong base that Trump has on the Republican Party. But I think Nikki Haley has to win. But I just want to be maybe the odd duck out. I'm used to being that person. But I think she might have a shot. New Hampshire voters like to throw curveballs to my baseball player over here. And I think tonight might be a night where we see it happen.
He used to throw curveballs.
Sliders.
Sliders.
Slider was my best bet.
Okay. All right. In the minor leagues.
That's right.
Never in the major?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Not yet.
I still got a few years left.
All right, good.
Well, let's just remember this. The one reason for Nikki Haley to stay in this, regardless of what happens, is like the lotto. You got to be in it to win it. If she doesn't stay in the game, there's no way she gets to be president of the United States, and you never know what might happen. We've seen some crazy things in the last few years in politics.
All right, guys, don't leave. We're going to be having a lot to discuss. That's all coming up. This note to our viewers, tomorrow I'll have an exclusive interview with the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff. That airs in the Situation Room tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. That will be interesting. Up next, we'll take you back to New Hampshire, where officials say they could be on track for a record turnout today. So what are voters saying about Trump and Haley? You'll hear what they're saying. That's coming up next. Plus, we'll hear from a top New Hampshire Republican who had once believed the 2020 election was stolen from Trump, but later changed his mind. Now he's backing Nikki Haley.
And welcome back to our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary election. Live voters there coming in. Still, right now, that's in Concord, New Hampshire. We're in the final a couple hours here before polls close. And across New Hampshire, we're getting reports of very strong turnout. So the question is, for what? Is that going to be a big boon for Nikki Haley, or will voters help Donald Trump all but lock up the nomination? The crucial questions tonight. John Berman and Kate Baldwin standing by at polling locations. They have been talking to voters all day, watching the vote. So, John, I guess you're in Manchester. What has turnout been like where you are? I see some people behind you still coming in.
I'll give you a live count of exactly where I am in this ward in just a second, Aaron. This is Manchester, New Hampshire, the biggest city here. This is Ward 6, where Donald Trump in 2016 in the primary won big. He lost this ward to Joe Biden in the general election, so you can see there are all kinds of voters. Actually, right now the table is empty, but I am reliably told the rush hour is about to begin. 5 to 7, they could see the biggest rush. This pile of slips you see right here on the table, right there, when voters arrive, if they want to vote in the Democratic primary, they grab a blue slip right there. If they want to vote in the Republican primary, they grab a red slip right here, then they go get a ballot. Remember, undeclared voters, independents largely, they can choose which primary to vote in, and they make up a really large voting block here in New Hampshire. They will not tell me right now, until the polls close, how many Republican ballot requests they had or how many Democratic ballot requests they had. Now, I'm going to walk backwards here, try not to fall, and I'm going to go to the tabulation machine, and I'm going to give you a real live count of how many ballots have been cast in this ward so far. We can't shoot the ballots just yet, so after these two women put their ballots in, I will shoot the vote count total so you can see a live look. Let's push into the number right now. So as of about 4:43 p.m., 2,310 votes have been cast here. 2,310. In 2016, which was the highest turnout, 3,700 votes were here. So they're about 1,400 short of that right now. Could they get record Republican turnout? That's still possible. Remember, there may not be that many Democrats voting because Joe Biden didn't compete here, although we have spoken to a few people who did write in his name. We can talk to a voter right now. We can't talk to them on the way in. We can't talk to them after they voted. What's your name?
Valerie.
Valerie, it's very nice to meet you. The $1,000,000 question. You voted. Who'd you vote for?
I voted for Dave Phillips.
You voted for Dave Phillips in the Democratic primary. Why'd you do that?
I'm looking for a change a little bit. You know, just like a lot of them have been saying, you know, we need to shake things up a little bit, you know, and I'm a little concerned about Joe Biden's age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that does concern me a little bit. I've been a registered Democrat all my life, so former from Massachusetts, so you come up, you know, the ranks, but be a Democrat. You know, I just think that I'm not ready to have Donald Trump in there again.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Dean Phillips. You cast a ballot for Dean Phillips. Dean Phillips is on the ballot here. Democrats who want to vote for Joe Biden have to write his name in. Thank you very much. That is the first Dean Phillips voter we've spoken to here. We have spoken to a number of voters who have written in Joe Biden on the ballot. Most voters here, though, voting in the Republican primary. Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. But it is an interesting part of the story, the layers of the onion in New Hampshire. Idiosyncratic and fascinating. All right, so now, thanks to John, let's go to Nashua, where Kate has spent the day talking to voter after voter. And Kate, what are they telling you?
So Nashua is the second most populous city in New Hampshire, second only to where John is in Manchester. And we have talked to many voters who have come through here. This is Ward 3 of 9 wards in Nashua. And we have met, John met a Dean Phillips voter. We've met Dean Phillips voters. We've met Joe Biden voters. We have met Nikki Haley voters. We have met Donald Trump voters. We have really met across the board all types of voters. One thing we know is that this ward has just under, registered voters are just under 5,000 here in Ward 3. So far, the latest count just a moment ago is that they have 1,729 votes that have been cast. This polling location, this closes at 8 o'clock, a little bit later than a lot of the other parts of the state. So unknown is exactly how many more people are going to be coming in and if this will reach a kind of the record robust turnout that they're talking about tonight. But as I mentioned, Nikki Haley voters, we've met quite a few of them. We've also met quite a few of Donald Trump voters. Donald Trump won Ward 3 in the Republican primary here in 2016, also won national in the Republican primary in 2016. And here's Christopher Tsoukalis. He voted for Trump in 16, 20, and here's why he's voting for him again.
He's going to fix the economy. The economy is brutal right now. We're getting killed with groceries, fuel bills. Everything is just like, it's just unbelievable.
Was there ever a moment you considered voting for Nikki Haley?
Yes, I did consider. I think she's going to make a good running mate for Trump, actually.
Christopher said economy, economy, and economy is what he's voting on. What is unknowable is exactly if there are, how many voters just like Christopher are in this ward and turning out today, and if Donald Trump will be able to pull out another win. But it all comes down to that black box. That's the ballot box right there. That's where every voter, undeclared Republican, Democrat, after they have voted, they take it right there, as you see happening in action right now. We're going to continue to watch at 8 p.m. They'll hit the button, and we'll be able to get that final count pretty quickly. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much to you, Kate. And just look at the numbers off of what Kate had. About 35% turnout there, but she says they're open till 8. And of course, we hear about the rush hour right after work. So that 5 to 8 o'clock, we'll see what happens. But right now, turnout there from the registered voters she talked about, right now running at 35%. We'll see how high it goes if it is a record and whether it's enough for Trump to take Nikki Haley out of the race for the Republican nomination, which he says he doesn't want to do, but he does.
I think one person will be gone probably tomorrow.
Yep. And her campaign responds next. Plus, we are minutes away from getting the first exit poll results on who is actually casting all those ballots today, which way they're leaning. It's crucial information. It's coming up in a few minutes.
All right, we're just minutes away from getting the first exit poll results out of the New Hampshire primary, which will give us a sense of who is showing up to vote and how they voted. Nikki Haley is determined to deliver an upset win over Donald Trump by turning out independent voters. I'm joined now by retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc, who supports Nikki Haley and is a volunteer campaign chair for her New Hampshire campaign. General, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your service, of course. I know you've been out campaigning with Nikki Haley in New Hampshire. What's your sense of the level of enthusiasm for her on the ground, and how do you expect her potentially to win today?
Well, I think the enthusiasm is high. I think that, she's going to turn that into a very strong appearance today. I believe that she's going to win. Nikki Haley has gone from 2% in this state all the way up to margin of error with Donald Trump, and she is really connected with the entire electorate here. And she's done it the New Hampshire way with over 150 appearances here in this state. So she's worked hard, she's put the work in, and it's going to show tonight.
We will see fairly soon. Earlier today, a group of U.S. military vets known as Veterans for Responsible Leadership, that's their name, put out an anti-Trump ad in New Hampshire. Here's a piece of that. Watch this.
I want to be a dictator.
He talks about terminating the Constitution.
Hail Trump! Hail victory!
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
We know what a second term means.
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said no, other than day one.
When has one day ever been enough for a dictator?
So, General, a lot of veterans, as you know, live in your home state. Do you think this ad resonates with them? And do you share those concerns?
Well, I think it does, and I do share these concerns because I believe that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are very divisive. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both divisive. They both have grievances. They both have investigations, and it's going to continue to separate America. We need someone who's going to unify, and that is Nikki Haley. That is her strongest attribute. Donald Trump will not serve America well in his second term. We don't want him to have a second term. It's only 4 years. It's short-sighted. And Nikki Haley has long-term views for this country. She's going to fix the economy, and she's going to make America strong again, and she's going to set up a prosperous America for our children and grandchildren. President Trump just will not do that.
I know, General, you previously supported Donald Trump and his false claims that he won the election in 2020, but you eventually said you did the research and found that Trump was wrong. Given your concerns and the fact that you've said Trump is now part of that swamp right now, would you support Trump if he were to become the Republican nominee?
I'm going to have to do a lot of thinking about that, but it is going to be very difficult for me to do that because he is just too divisive for me. He'll tear the country apart. He's done it before. He's already said he's going to be a vindictive president. He's focused on the past. We need to move forward. And that's why it's so important for people to support Nikki Haley. She will move us forward. We will be more prosperous under Nikki Haley. And that is that's just a fact. And she beats Biden by 17 points.
General Bolduc, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it very much. Up next, the first exit polling numbers are now coming in, and they could give us important clues about how tonight will turn out for both Trump and Nikki Haley. Stand by. We're following breaking news. We're getting the first results from our exit polls in New Hampshire, where the nation's first primary is underway. Welcome back to CNN Special Coverage. I'm Wolf Blitzer in New York.
And I'm Erin Burnett in Washington. And of course, Wolf, we are going through the numbers right now, standing by to report them as soon as we possibly can.
And we'll get those numbers to our viewers very quickly. Trump, of course, the front runner, and just a short time ago telling reporters he feels very confident about tonight. Haley, on the other hand, hoping to shatter expectations, telling reporters she's in it for the long run. Officials telling CNN the turnout has been strong and steady and could even potentially set a record.
And of course, Wolf, that means we could be in for some potentially major surprises tonight. It's 5 o'clock with those exit polls. That's also rush hour for voters. And we understand some of our polling stations, reporters there are saying these next 2 hours, a lot of people could be coming out to vote. And our reporters are, of course, at these polling locations in this final time here. Before polls close, Kristen Holmes is covering all things Trump-related, live for us at Trump's campaign headquarters in Nashua. And Kristen, what is the latest there, the mood there in these final hours?
Well, Erin, they're certainly not hoping for any surprises. They believe that they can walk away from this primary with a double-digit lead, or at least +7. That's the margin that they're looking for. Anything in that area they believe is a victory. Now, this is a very different Trump team than I talked to just 2 weeks ago when they were very concerned about what they were seeing in Haley's poll numbers. They implemented a two-part strategy. Now, just to remind viewers, in New Hampshire, independents and Republicans can vote in the GOP primary. And what Trump's team was concerned about was those independent voters, particularly voters who might go just to vote against Donald Trump, or voters who are more left-leaning who would be interested in a different choice. So they implemented a strategy hitting Nikki Haley in a series of ads. One on immigration. That was to target their Republican base that they believe Donald Trump is still leading strongly. The other was hitting her on Social Security. That was to try and stem what they saw as a rise in independent voters who are interested in her. And it was clear that got under Haley's skin. We have seen her have to answer question after question about Social Security. She continues to say that she does not want to change Social Security, but those ads, they were effective. So that's where the Trump team is right now. They are hoping for a big margin. So this is a definitive that they can put this to bed in terms of the Republican nomination, but they are waiting, and they say anything in terms of a 7% or more would be a victory for them. Wolf?
Kristen Holmes reporting. Kristen, thank you very much. Our Kylie Atwood is keeping a very close eye as well on Nikki Haley's campaign. She's over at the campaign's headquarters in Concord, New Hampshire. Kylie, what can you tell us?
Well, listen, Nikki Haley's campaign today putting out a memo saying that Haley isn't going anywhere, saying that what we are seeing play out right now is democracy in action, reminding folks that she is the last one standing against former President Trump after 12 other candidates have dropped their bid. And Nikki Haley, for her part, is also projecting determination. She's not specifically saying how well she wants to do here in New Hampshire tonight. She says she wants to have a strong showing, to do better than she did in Iowa, but not getting too specific in terms of what that would look like. Now, I asked her if she comes in double digits behind former President Trump, what that means for the future of her campaign. We don't want to get ahead of the votes, but that's what some of the polls show could be possible. She said she doesn't want to write her obituary. She's headed to South Carolina, noting that her campaign has already invested $4 million in an ad buy there, with ads going up on television as part of that starting tomorrow, and also noting that her campaign has managed the economics, the money of her campaign well. We were told by our campaign that in the last 2 days or so, since DeSantis dropped out, they have hauled in about $1.5 million in new donations, so they're feeling pretty good about that, obviously. And her final pitch to voters last night was, do they want more of the same, or do they want to move forward? And that's the answer that we're going to get as voters head to the polls tonight. Wolf?
All right,
Aaron?
Kylie, thank you very, very much. Kylie Atwood reporting.
All right, Wolf. And Wolf, we do have breaking news. Exit polls in New Hampshire released just moments ago, and this gives us our first clues about who the primary voters are, whether they are perhaps more aligned with Donald Trump or Nikki Haley. The information in here is fascinating and illuminating. David Chalian has been going through these numbers frenetically, but carefully, and here he is to give us the very latest that you've learned. So, David, what are you seeing in the early exit numbers?
And just to remind everyone, Aaron, you just said early exit numbers. So these are people who showed up early throughout the day. There are more exit polls taking place now as people are going to the polls. These numbers will shift over the course of the night. But I want to highlight for you what a different electorate is, different political DNA in New Hampshire than we saw a week ago in Iowa. Look here, among New Hampshire Republican primary voters today, 24% say they're very conservative, 39% say somewhat conservative, 31% identify themselves as moderate. That number in Iowa last week was 9%. That's how much more moderate this Republican primary electorate is than was the Iowa caucus electorate last week. Obviously, only 6% in the GOP primary say they're liberal. How about those undeclareds we've been talking about for quite some time? Look at what a huge chunk of the electorate they make up. 47%, you see there in the middle, 47% of Republican primary voters today in New Hampshire are undeclareds or independents in New Hampshire. They're called undeclareds. 49% are registered Republicans. That's even a tick higher than we saw all the way back in 2012 in terms of independents being a share of the electorate, the last time there was a Republican-only primary without anything going on the Democratic side. That is going to be welcome news for Nikki Haley's campaign to see that number. Are you part of the MAGA movement? Mm-hmm. Only a third of voters in the primary today, again, these numbers are early, they will shift as we do more interviews, but 32% say yes, they're part of the MAGA movement, 64% say no. In Iowa last week, Aaron, that was split roughly half and half in the Iowa Republican electorate. And do you think Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 election? This is now an even split among Republican primary voters in New Hampshire today, whereas in Iowa last week, 2/3 of Iowa Republican caucus goers said they didn't think, wrongly said, that they didn't think Joe Biden was legitimately elected. Here, that's half and half. This is an electorate. This is why Nikki Haley put all her money in New Hampshire here. This is an electorate that just by its shape and contours, as we're seeing show up today, is one that makes Nikki Haley more competitive against Donald Trump.
All right, David, thank you very much. So I'm here with John King. John, just going through all of this. I mean, it's pretty incredible. You know, you look at just did Biden win the election legitimately? In Iowa last week, 29% said yes. 66 said no. Here it's 49-49. Now, 49 is still a really high number, by the way. I sort of take a deep breath at that. But it is a very different just slice of people.
And so, again, let's emphasize, David emphasized, you emphasized, let me emphasize early numbers, right? Those numbers right there tell you, we talked about this earlier, the composition of the electorate. That's important. Who votes today? Not just how many, but who are they? That's favorable. Those numbers are favorable to Haley. Doesn't mean she'll win. Doesn't mean she'll be within a point or two. It just tells you those early numbers are favorable to her. To that point, though, I will say Chris Sununu is the Republican governor here. He's pretty popular, not among the most MAGA voters, but I talked to several Trump voters who do not consider themselves part of the MAGA movement. One guy, Devin McIver, I'm sorry, is a construction worker. He says he drives past them every weekend. They're out on the roads with their signs. He says he laughs at them and thinks, go home and clean your yard. So let's be careful about that. There are a lot of Trump Republicans who vote for him for transactional reasons, who think the MAGA movement is just a little too much for them. But if you look at those numbers, especially the moderate composition of the electorate, let me come down here. We talked about this a little bit before, but I just want to point out, the more moderates, you see right here, this is from our poll, 71% of moderates vote for Nikki Haley, 71% of conservatives vote for Donald Trump in our New Hampshire poll. So the more moderate the electorate, the better for Nikki Haley, without a doubt.
All right, so now I'm just going through the registered undeclared versus GOP. Okay, so in here you had obviously also favorable for Haley when you actually look at the exit polls. And to your point about when we say numbers are still coming in, I think everyone should understand, we mean that there's still 2 to 3 hours of voting.
Right.
And it's a rush hour. So we don't know what's going to happen in these numbers. You are having a lot more people come in. But
to that point, can I go back in time for a minute?
Yes.
I just want to go back in time for a minute. This is a long time back, right? But we were on the air in New Hampshire in 2008, the first year we had this amazing tool for us here. Some of our rivals had called New Hampshire for Hillary Clinton. For Barack Obama. For Barack Obama. And we did not, and we waited. Why? Because we were told, we had people on the ground, and we were told by smart people in campaigns to watch, and there were a lot of late votes down here in the Manchester area. Working class people. You just mentioned 5 o'clock, rush hour, people coming out after work. So let's wait. Let's wait. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? This is why we count votes, and this is why we're extra cautious here. Because sometimes what you see early on is not what you get at the end, not because anything nefarious is happening, because people vote at different times of the day, and you have a lot of blue-collar people here who, a lot of them voted before they went to work this morning. We saw a lot of people out there early at 6 a.m., but if you didn't do that and you want to vote, you're going to vote at 6, 5:30, 6, 7, right up to the last minute because you just got out of work.
all right, so now, okay, on that front, again, these numbers could change, but very conservative, somewhat conservative. When I look at that, obviously very different than Iowa, right? That was very conservative, was more than half the electorate, and very and somewhat, you were pretty much done. Here, though, very conservative is only a quarter, 24% so far. Somewhat conservative, 39, combined with moderate, 31. That is a dominant majority, and that is very different than what you saw in Iowa. But also, John, I'm just looking back to my quick notes of New Hampshire in 2016. It is different than 2016, but honestly, by not much. Moderate up just a few points. So it's not a huge increase in moderates.
It's not a huge increase. And so a couple points about that. Number one, on the surface, those numbers say, okay, that gives Haley a shot. She's in play because the electorate is composed of people who we know. Again, moderates like her, conservatives like him. So the more moderate you hear, your first instinct should be that keeps her in play, that keeps her competitive. That's important. Number two, undeclared. They outnumber statewide registration, undeclared in New Hampshire, independents, they call them undeclared there, outnumber both parties. So you think the more undeclared people, that should benefit her. She certainly needs a lot of them to come off the sidelines. However, a lot of Trump voters also are not fans of the Republican establishment. So some of them may not be registered as Republicans because they don't think of themselves as establishment people, so we need to be careful about that. I just want to add this, though, to go back to 2016. Even as we go through all this, this is the Republican Party in 2016. As you noted, in 2016 in New Hampshire, you had a more moderate electorate than you did in Iowa. Well, this is Donald Trump's first win. Donald Trump won here in 2016 with that more moderate, more independent electorate. So the question is, does he still have a hold on these people? Or do those numbers say those people are looking for a new choice? Because if you look here, number one, this is the entire state. So we know for a fact Donald Trump is the candidate of rural voters, right? So anything you see lit up here now is a rural township, right? We call them townships in New Hampshire. John Kasich won some. Ted Cruz won one. Look at all that Donald Trump in the rural area, right? That's going back to 2016. Sorry, sometimes you catch the map when you go by. So let's pop it back out here and bring it back up. And now one other quick thing here. Look at suburban, right? For Haley to win, she's got to do well in the suburbs. Well, these are the New Hampshire suburbs in 2016.
Right. Which are, by the way, also to give people some context, Boston suburbs, too. Yeah. I mean, in some cases.
North of Boston, Donald Trump did very well there. So the question is, what is today's Republican Party, today's Republican electorate, because undeclareds are there as well, compared to this one? Back in 2016, that more moderate, less conservative electorate loved Donald Trump. The question is, What about today?
Right, and has that changed in light of all of the events that have happened? All right, well, next, as we're just starting to go through it here, receive some of the first exit polling data on who has actually cast ballots so far in New Hampshire, even though a lot of people in rush hour here now are still coming in. These numbers are dynamic and changing. We've got a group of experts going through these in great detail to see who might actually benefit more from what we have just seen so far, Trump or Haley. Plus, we'll take you back to the ground, to the polling sites in New Hampshire, to hear from the voters who are going in right now to cast their votes. We'll be back.
Welcome back to our special coverage. Take a look at this live pictures of a polling place in New Hampshire, less than 2 hours away from when most polls will close in New Hampshire's first in the nation primary. So what could be Nikki Haley's last stand? Potentially it could be Nikki Haley's last stand in her battle to beat Donald Trump, but we shall see. The exit poll numbers are now coming in just to CNN, showing that 47% of voters were not declared as Democrats or Republicans. 49% were registered Republicans. Kristen, what do these numbers tell you?
That maybe if these numbers hold, and that is a huge if, I am the world's biggest skeptic of early exit polls, but if these numbers hold, this could be very interesting for Nikki Haley, because these are the kinds of numbers you would need to see for her to even have a shot. When I see these numbers, whether it's the ideological makeup, whether it's the partisan makeup, it's a lot of the ingredients she'd need. The worst news for her is that 49-49 split on did Donald Trump win in 2020.
Interesting indeed. These early exit polls actually show that 63% of voters today identified as very or somewhat conservative. 31% consider themselves moderate. What do you make of that as a Democrat?
Well, the other number that I find very interesting is still of that electorate, 50% still think Donald Trump won the election. And so where is that 50%? I'm assuming it's predominantly in that 63, very conservative number that is most likely, if you think Donald Trump is still the president, you probably are going to vote for him. And then the question is, to your point about early exit polls, is can he build up that number again? And if he does, then it looks worse for Nikki Haley to win. Maybe the margin is still closer, but that number of very conservative is pretty telling.
In these early exit poll numbers, Jeff, 32% of the voters identified as MAGA in these early exit polls. 64% did not. Does that give you hope as an anti-Trump Republican?
Pro-democracy Republican that's not crazy, yes. Certainly it does. I mean, that number is staggering. I think all of these numbers really show some sharp contrast as what we were talking about, the composite of the voter last week in Iowa. So certainly there's hope here that Nikki Haley is able to be within a stone's throw, either a couple points up or a couple points down, and then has a full month to walk into the South Carolina primary where if she shows up a few points up or down in this race, I think the donors will start to come in and give her a legitimate shot to try to turn change some minds.
Point. You know, Jamal, I thought another number that was significant, and I'm anxious to get your thoughts. The same number of voters in these early exit polls said they did not believe that Joe Biden won the election in 2020. The same number thought that Joe Biden did win the election in 2020.
Yeah, that's disturbing for the Republican Party, right? Because it means that people are living in fairy tale land. It means that they've taken in what Donald Trump said, and they're not asking questions. I was listening to what Kristen was saying earlier about the makeup of the electorate, and it just, reminds all of us that when Donald Trump ran the first time in 2016, there was a competitive Democratic primary that was happening. Hillary Clinton was running against Bernie Sanders. So you probably didn't have as many of those moderates and liberals that you're talking about, you're seeing in the electorate right now in the early exits. You didn't have them because they were all participating in a Democratic primary. So what this means is, I wonder what this means for Dean Phillips, because it means maybe some of the people that he was counting on who might show up in that Democratic primary to try to give him a little juice to poke President Biden, maybe they're not there because maybe they're all playing on the Republican side.
What do you think?
Yeah, certainly this is an electorate that is slightly to the left of where things were in 2016 for the Republicans. And this time around, Donald Trump, when he won in 2016, he won because he won both conservatives and moderates. He won Republicans and independents in New Hampshire. His appeal is much stronger, but much more concentrated in the conservative Republican wing of the party. That's why he's so formidable in South Carolina. That's why Nikki Haley's road still does look like it may end at the end of this, but New Hampshire, this is just a different electorate. If she's going to win anywhere, this has to be it.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating because fairly soon we will be seeing the actual results as opposed to the exit poll early numbers. So everybody stand by. Coming up, we're going to take you back to the ground to a polling station where there is strong turnout tonight, what this potentially could mean for both of these campaigns. Plus, we'll check in with a powerful GOP donor. He was for DeSantis, but now that DeSantis is out, who will he support? Stand by.
Our political system has a reputation for scandals, corruption, bribery, wire fraud, a secret love affair. You can't write this stuff.
United States of Scandal with Jake Tapper premieres Sunday, February 18th at 9 on CNN.
There's nothing better than a Subway Series footlong, except when you add on an all-new footlong sidekick. We're talking a $2 footlong churro, $3 footlong pretzel, and a $5 footlong cookie. Every epic footlong deserves a perfect sidekick. Order one with your favorite Subway Series sub today.
At DriveTime.com, we've been hard at work, and we finally did it.
Did you make it so I can finally see my real payments and shop for thousands of cars with no hit to my credit?
Wait, yes!
Shop for cars online with no credit hit. Yeah! Go to DriveTime.com and get approved with no credit hit.
You need new replacement windows, but you're just not sure if they're in the budget this year, right? I'm Brian Gary here with Ted Coons from Renewal by Anderson, and he's here to talk about how to make window replacement more affordable.
Well, first, Brian, you don't have to do them all. You could just replace your worst windows first. Or another way to make them affordable is to change the style of window. For example, you could do a gliding window instead of a casement. We have a lot of ways to make window projects really affordable.
Compared to other window companies, you have a completely different business model.
Yeah, with other companies, there's just too many people involved in the process. There's the manufacturer, the seller, and then the installer, and then the customer. And if you call with a problem, that's when they say, oh, well, we're the manufacturer. You have to call the installer for that problem, or vice versa. We're the full-service replacement window division of Anderson. With us, there's no passing the buck. At Renewal by Anderson, we sell, build, install, and warrant our windows and patio doors. So if there's ever an issue, we take full responsibility for it.
Why don't you sell vinyl windows?
It doesn't matter if it's a $200 window or a $1,200 window. A lot of vinyl windows just don't last. For energy efficiency and beauty, there's a much better option. Our windows Fibrex composite material is available in 9 designer colors, and it's much more durable than vinyl. Well, Fibrex is low maintenance like vinyl, but stronger than vinyl. And it's beautiful like wood, but doesn't require the upkeep of wood.
Renewal by Anderson's New Year's sales event is going on now. Save $375 on every window and save $775 on every patio door and entry door with 0 money down, 0 monthly payments, and 0 interest for 1 year. Celebrate the new year with new windows and doors. Our New Year's sales event ends January 31st. For a free appointment, call 1-800-501-1400.
It was deep into the winter freeze when Ryan and Brenda Brinkham made a pact. We will no longer be prisoners to you, Wisconsin winter. We shall fly south to where the courts are eternally bright, and we will do so with a new phone plan, one with the same coverage, up to half the cost. They may call us snowbirds,
but we're phoenixes.
When freedom calls, we're here to answer.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
I love your dress.
Oh, thanks. I splurged a little because Liberty Mutual customized my car insurance and I saved hundreds.
That's great.
I know, right? I've been telling everyone.
Liberty.
Did you hear that? I just said her first word. Can you say mama?
Liberty. Can you say auntie? Liberty. How many people did you tell?
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, liberty, liberty.
Liberty.
Our ears connect us to the moments that matter. Give them the nutrients they need with new Lipo Balance Support. It's formulated with ingredients clinically shown to reduce vertigo-like symptoms such as dizziness, spinning, and swaying. Never miss a moment with lipoflavonoid.
I'm Melanie Zanona on Capitol Hill, and this is CNN.
And And welcome back to our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary election. These are live pictures from Manchester, where voters are still filing in to cast their ballots. It is a pivotal moment right now. Donald Trump hoping to essentially clinch the GOP nomination. Nikki Haley trying to keep her campaign alive and give it some real momentum heading into the next contests, including her home state of South Carolina. Boris Sanchez is in Belmont, New Hampshire. And Boris, I know you have been there speaking to voters throughout the day. You're now in the last 90 minutes or so of voting, but people who are finishing work, you could start to see another surge of people. What are you seeing and what are they telling you?
Aaron, it is rush hour right now here in Belmont. I want you to take a look at the line right now. It is pretty much the biggest that we've seen all day. And keep in mind, these are several lines. They're sorted alphabetically for folks. I was just speaking to the moderator at this primary location. His name is Alvin, and he was telling me that turnout here is getting close to half of all registered voters in this area. We want to turn the camera over in this direction. When voters are done casting their ballots, they come over to this machine, they place it inside the machine, and Alvin here is about to tell us where the vote is right now. How many ballots have been cast?
2,155.
And how many is that in registered voter terms, like the proportion?
The total registered voters is 4,489, so we're almost at 50%.
This guy's got all the numbers. Sir, do you think it's running smoothly so far today?
Well, this is my first time here, so I think it's okay. Right, so thank you.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that with us. I do want to get you some perspective from a voter, Aaron, but this kind of turnout is exactly what sources aligned with the Trump campaign are telling me that they want to see in Belmont. They believe that if he can run up the numbers here, he can close the door on the 2024 primary and defeat Nikki Haley. We do want to take you outside, though, because we want to sort of respect the process and give voters their privacy, obviously. There is another really important race, at least symbolically, going on, and that's on the Democratic side. Remember, there's been a spat between the DNC and the state of New Hampshire because, in part, President Biden and the National Party wanted to move the New Hampshire primary after South Carolina. Voters here didn't like that so much. They're holding the primary anyway, even though the DNC is not actually awarding delegates to the winner. But here we have Mike. Mike, thank you so much for chatting with us, Mike. You mentioned that you came here to write in the name of President Biden, even though he wasn't on the ballot. Why?
I still think he's the best candidate for the presidency. I didn't know any other candidates on the ballot, to be honest, and so that's the reason why I wrote him in. And I think he's doing a fairly decent job as being president.
Now, I had the chance to speak to some voters earlier who told me that they were offended by the decision by the DNC to prioritize South Carolina and move New Hampshire's historically first in the nation primary back. Were you offended at all? Do you feel like your voice is being silenced?
No, I wasn't offended at all. I didn't take anything bothered by it at all.
And are you casting a ballot for President Biden in November, you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for chatting with us. We'll let you get on your way. Thank you so much for waiting patience. We do appreciate it. So there you have a snapshot of what's going on here in Belmont. Aaron, it is just one area where folks are voting in one county in New Hampshire, but it gives you an idea of the enthusiasm as you're watching crowds leave this area. Aaron? All
right, Boris, thank you very much. So I want to now go to longtime Republican donor Dan Eberhart. He was a staunch supporter of Ron DeSantis. Of course, DeSantis has ended his presidential bid on Sunday. And Dan, you and I have spoken over these years about the GOP. A week ago, obviously, last time you and I spoke, you were all in for DeSantis, and now he's out. So you've got a two-person race. What does that mean for your support?
Well, look, I took a look at Nikki Haley, went to one of her rallies, but, I'd like to come out and endorse Donald Trump for president, Aaron Burnett.
All right. So, Dan, you, as I said, we've spoken a lot, and I want to understand how you got there. So you've expressed real concerns about him, right? You've talked about his grievance politics. You've talked about your concern about his ability to beat Biden. And in many of these conversations, you said something to me back in July overall about Trump. I wanted to play it so everyone can hear it.
Trump is a weak front runner. He's much weaker than Biden, and he lost the last time anyway.
Dan, that was you in July saying he's much weaker than Biden and he lost last time anyway. And then on Twitter a few days ago, you tweeted if Trump were somehow reelected, he'd be the oldest. Okay, he can't hear me, which is this is obviously a tough question to do if he can't hear me. So everyone bear with me. I'm here with my panel while we work on this. McKay Coppins, and I want to hear what Dan has to say because I have talked to him over the years, right? So he comes to Trump not easily this time, although he did raise money for him before. What do you take away from these exit polls as we see them? And just to clarify, the exit polls we have are people who picked a GOP ballot. So that could mean you're registered GOP or you're an independent, but not Democrats who are in this Dean Phillips, Joe Biden situation.
So I thought, to me, the most revealing number in those exit polls was about whether Joe Biden had won legitimately the 2020 election. It said 49%, an even split. 49% said yes, 49% said no. You know, there's one way to look at that and feel really alarmed about what that means for America and the faith in this year's election. On the other hand, I will say, more than any other question, more than whether you identify as conservative or MAGA, that question of whether Trump really won the election is the litmus test that shows whether you have bought into Donald Trump as a candidate. So what I'm going to be looking for tonight is if that number holds and only half of the voters in New Hampshire have bought Trump's lies about the election, what does that mean for how many more of the voters who don't believe him he's going to be able to pick off in this race? We'll see if they hold, but I think that was a revealing.
Hold on 1 second. I'm coming back to everybody. We got Dan back. So Dan, all right. You said you were now getting ready. You were on board with Trump. You're endorsing Trump. You're going to back him financially. And I was asking you about the concerns you've expressed about him in the past in our many conversations. You talked about his grievance politics. You'd expressed real concern about his ability to beat Biden. So last summer, you and I were speaking in July. You said this.
Sure. Trump is a weak front runner. He's much weaker than Biden, and he lost the last time anyway.
And then in a tweet just 3 days ago, Dan, you said if Trump were somehow reelected, he'd be the oldest president at the time of his inauguration, even older than Biden was. So I point all this out to show you have had and you have very serious concerns. What is it about Trump now that outweighs all of those concerns and makes it worth backing him again?
Well, look, first of all, when I got into this a year ago and I decided to back Governor DeSantis in the primary, I didn't think Donald Trump could beat Joe Biden in a general election. And Aaron, I think the polling now shows a completely different story, and I don't think that's a concern anymore. So I think I'm left with Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee, and I think that, look, we're going to have this horse race tonight, but I think the door is closing or just about closed or will close tonight on Nikki Haley's candidacy. And I think that what we're looking at here is a general election matchup between Trump and Biden. And I think that Donald Trump is better on the economy, better on energy, better on foreign policy than Joe Biden. And so that's why I'm putting my support and my resources and my time into trying to elect Donald Trump for a second term in 2024.
And if Nikki Haley does do better than expected tonight, and obviously we don't know what these exit polls necessarily mean, and they are changing, right? But 49% of the people who have gone to the polls so far, who have picked up a GOP ballot, say that Biden won legitimately. 49% say that he did not. Now, I'm not saying that's a ceiling on Trump's support. Perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't. Just an important number to have out there. If she does exceed expectations, would that change your mind at this point, Dan?
It wouldn't change my mind at all. Look, New Hampshire, either way, New Hampshire is going to be the high water mark for Nikki Haley. When we roll into South Carolina and beyond, we have more closed primaries with more red, more conservative voters. And, when Nikki Haley lands in South Carolina, she's going to find a state where the governor and both senators are backing Donald Trump. And I'd like to point out, Ron DeSantis had 15 state legislators or 75 state legislators in South Carolina supporting him in this race, and Nikki Haley had 15, not to mention the big number that Trump has. So I think that in that state, she's going to perform very badly in her home state, and it just gets worse as you look forward to the Texas, Oklahomas, and Tennessees.
All right. Well, Dan, I appreciate your time, and everyone should know, obviously, you raised $100,000 for Ron DeSantis, $100,000 for Trump last time around, and now formally backing Trump again. Dan, thanks very much. I appreciate it. And we do have new results from our exit polls coming in, including answers to some more key questions. For example, what is the single most important issue for the voters who have been to the polls so far today? And we're going to talk to more voters live at the polls in this poll rush hour right now.
Welcome back to CNN's special coverage of the New Hampshire primary election. We're digging deeper right now into the exit polls that were just released, getting a more detailed picture of how Granite State voters are feeling about some of the major issues defining this primary. And we just got some more exit poll results. Our political director, David Chalian, has been going through the numbers with our team. Tell us about these latest numbers, David. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we asked New Hampshire Republican primary voters today, Wolf, what is the single most important issue to your vote tonight? You see there the economy comes in first with 34% saying that was the most important issue, followed very closely by immigration at 31%. That's similar to what we saw in Iowa a week ago. Economy and immigration dominating for Republican primary voters this year so far. The nation's economy, what do you consider the condition of it? Take a look at those bottom numbers, Wolf. Nearly 70%, if you combine them, say that the nation's economy is not so good or poor. Only about 30% say that the condition of the nation's economy are excellent or good. Immigration. Do you believe most undocumented immigrants in the United States should be deported? A slim majority of Republican primary voters in New Hampshire, 51%, say yes, deported. 45% say they should be offered a chance at legal status. And on the issue of abortion, a national abortion ban. Are you in favor of banning most or all abortions nationwide? 2/3 of New Hampshire Republican primary voters oppose such a national ban. Only 27% say they favor a ban. And then U.S. role in the world. How do you see this? You know there's this isolationist versus more global perspective within the Republican Party, a debate. Well, you see there's 40% of Republican primary voters say a less active role in the world is what the U.S. should be doing. 30% say more active. 26% say it should be the same as it is right now. Aaron?
All right. Thank you very much, David Chalian. All right, Jamie, going through these latest numbers that David is sharing. And again, these are just the exit poll numbers that we have up into these the recent hour, and people are still voting. So these numbers will change. But what stands out to you from these latest?
So obviously the economy. Right. Everybody cares about the economy. There's that large number, not so good, that you're hearing there. I think it's actually interesting. The immigration, 51 said deported. I think 45, if I'm reading my handwriting, legal status. That may be closer than I expected. I expected there. The abortion ban, of course, fascinating. Flip, once again, this is when you're looking at American voters as a whole. They do not want an abortion ban. You're seeing a big number there. Can I just go back for 2 seconds to the 49-49 on whether Biden was legitimately elected? This is a glass half full man.
That's why we love you, McKay.
I will tell you that the texts that came through on my phone were 5-alarm fire. When, even, what did you say? You were happy that...
It's only 49%. For the purposes of tonight, your sources are right, and you're right that it's a major concern for the state of democracy and what it means for November, when inevitably we'll have another.
But in a Republican primary, you're saying it's a little different.
I'm just saying if only half of the voters have bought into Trump's conspiracy theory, that could indicate that he has a ceiling for how many people are willing to vote for him.
Can I just talk about the abortion number?
Yes.
Because I think that is so striking.
This is 67% oppose a ban.
Yes.
In New Hampshire, only 27% favor it.
Right. So here you have a Republican primary, effectively, and you have this 67% number, and you have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris tonight talking about Roe and talking about the repeal of Roe. And it is the one surefire issue that the Democrats have going into this next election. And, it's unclear how motivational it will be. But when you see a number like that, you have to assume it's going to be very motivational.
And it has worked in red states, Kansas, Ohio.
And listen, Donald Trump knows this, right? That's why he is saying that if he is elected, he's going to, negotiate a better deal on
like it's a real
abortion.
estate deal.
Yeah, like it's a real estate deal. And listen, it's also why Nikki Haley is sounding a little bit more moderate than Donald Trump, and sounded much more moderate than Ron DeSantis as well. It is shocking to me, though, and we'll see if these numbers change. The immigration, right? 45% of these voters think that folks should be offered a legal pathway here in this country. You know, Donald Trump obviously wants to ride the immigration issue to the White House in the way that he did in 2016. He doesn't quite have the build the wall slogan, but he has sort of more vicious sayings like
deportation
and poisoning the blood of the country. But so far, at least in these exit polls, some of these folks are sounding very moderate. You know, I think the big question is, are we seeing that Donald Trump has a much softer underbelly as a GOP front runner than we thought, than Iowa has indicated, than a lot of the endorsements have indicated as well? I mean, the guy who was for DeSantis, he initially said in July he's a weak front runner, he's weaker than Biden, and he lost anyways, right? And so I'm really interested in how these numbers evolve through the night and to see how this GOP electorate actually feels about Biden.
Trump has avoided a real issue-oriented campaign except in his advertising. And this shows you that at some point he's going to have to talk about issues. I doubt he's going to want to debate, but he's going to have to come to a decision on abortion. He's going to have to come to a decision on immediate deportation, given this kind of polling. And he's going to have to figure out that if he wants to win the presidency, he's going to have to appeal to other than the MAGA base.
Right.
And I think that's what some of these numbers show.
McKay, we do need to get, and obviously we'll see how it goes tonight and what it means, but the undeclared voters is short for independent, right? So these are independents who are registered as such, who can go request a Republican ballot, which they have done. We don't know much about them.
No.
Specifically, right? You can look at the overall, a quarter are very conservative, 40% are somewhat conservative, but you can't look within that undeclared.
Right.
And in that number could mean everything.
That could be the ball game tonight, right? Who are those independents?
Right.
Why did they show up to vote for a Republican primary?
People who voted for Trump before.
I was going to say, there's a note of caution here that in 2016, Donald Trump actually did pretty well with independents. He was bringing new people into the party. He was getting people who were not traditional Republican primary voters to vote for him. Now, that was 8 years ago. Trump has remade the Republican Party in his image. Independents could be a very different type of voter this time around, but that's going to be the thing to look for.
People like to identify as independent rather than a Democrat and a Republican these days.
Especially in New Hampshire.
Especially in New Hampshire. But throughout the country, there's a large group of people who are saying, I don't want to be affiliated with either party.
Right. All right. All, thank you. And we're going to go back to the ground after this, where officials are expecting this final rush of voters before the polls close. You have at least an hour and 10 minutes. And then where Kate Baldwin was, an extra hour after that till 8 o'clock. Lots more votes to be cast. We'll be back.
And welcome back to our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary election. We'll have more on those breaking exit poll numbers in just a moment. But first, we're in the very final hours of voting in this, the first in the nation primary, and turnout today appears to be strong. John Berman is standing by for us at a polling location in Manchester, New Hampshire. John, I know you've been talking to voters there all day. What are they telling you?
Yeah, Manchester, Ward 6 right now. Wolf, you can see there is a line right here. Everyone in line by 7 o'clock will be allowed to vote here. When they arrive, they walk up to this desk. And the crucial moment for them, before they vote, is which primary they're going to vote in. They choose if they're going to vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. If they're going to vote in the Republican primary, they grab a pink slip, Democratic primary, a blue slip. What we've been told is the vast majority of people here are voting in the Republican primary. Remember, undeclared voters, independents, they can vote in either. Most appear to be voting in the Republican primary, which is not surprising given, obviously, that President Biden is not competing here except as a write-in candidate. And one bit of editorial information I've been told, there are a lot of write-in ballots here. I was told there are this many write-in ballots, a bunch. They're going to have to count them all by hand after, and that will take some time. Let's get a sense quickly of how many ballots have been cast here. Let me just look right here at this counter. Let's push in. 2,636. 2,636 ballots have been cast in Ward 6 so far. Stuart, let's walk outside here. 3,700 ballots were cast in 2016. That was the record. 2,000 or so would be a record for Republicans. We don't know how many are voting in the Republican primary versus the Democratic, but most are voting in the Republican primary. We do have one voter here who did just cast a ballot. What's your name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer, you just voted in the primary here. Who'd you vote for?
I voted for Donald Trump.
You voted for Donald Trump. Why?
I love his policies and what he said he's going to do for the country.
Did you consider anyone else?
No, I did not.
Did you vote 4 years ago for Donald Trump?
I did.
8 years ago for Donald Trump?
Yes.
So you're Donald Trump through and through?
I am.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
nice
you
to
so
see
much.
you here. I should note Donald Trump did win this ward back in 2016 handily. He beat his nearest competitor by about 20 points or so. So this is the type of place he did well before. We'll see how well he does tonight. Wolf?
All right, John, thank you. Joining us now, an insider with a lot of political experience in this state, the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, Jennifer Horn. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us. I know you've been in close contact with your network across New Hampshire all day, traveling to polling sites across the state earlier this morning. So give our viewers a sense. What are you hearing?
Well, there's no question that we're going to exceed, in my mind, there's no question we're going to exceed the expected turnout. Turnout is huge. If you look in Salem, you look in Bedford, two of our, largest Republican strongholds here along the southern tier. In many of those polling places, turnout has already exceeded not just 2016, but what was expected today. And to your point, it is largely Republican voters and undeclareds participating in the Republican primary. And Wolf, there can be an argument made for both candidates as to who this benefits. But as you just heard from that voter in Manchester, my money is still with Donald Trump.
Our most recent exit poll results show some favorable numbers for the Nikki Haley campaign. Jennifer, 31% of the electorate is moderate, 39% somewhat conservative. So what does that tell you about her chances tonight?
I cannot, figure out heads or tails on why Nikki Haley is where she is exactly. She's not Trump, and as I looked through just a couple hours ago, the most recent polls, the daily tracking polls, Suffolk and UNH and St. A's, I think she's going to end up tonight right where those polls have her. The enthusiasm amongst the Republican voters is soundly with Donald Trump. I was speaking to someone just a couple minutes ago who said, they think he could break 60% tonight. I'm not going to put my money on that, but it's his night, and it's that enthusiasm. At 7 o'clock this morning, there were Trump sign holders at every polling place in Salem where Nikki Haley needs to do well and should do well. There wasn't a single Nikki Haley sign holder. Now, you can say signs don't vote. Of course they don't. But people standing out in the cold, enthusiastic enough to hold those signs, they vote. And that's where I really see the enthusiasm manifesting itself today on the ground.
And we know, Jennifer, that Nikki Haley will certainly need a lot of support from women voters if she's going to do well in New Hampshire. Her campaign, though, has largely avoided highlighting her as the only female candidate in this race. Do you think that was a missed opportunity for her?
Probably not, frankly, because I've just never seen where Republican voters or conservative voters are really inspired by that sort of thing. They just don't tune in as much or care as much about the first woman president, the first African-American president. Their response is always, if it's going to be a woman, I want the right woman. And we can speculate a lot about why that is, but I don't think it would have helped her. And I just heard the conversation before me about the numbers, the exit polling, and those abortion numbers, those right-to-life numbers, are really not in her favor. I think that has more impact than the fact that she's the first woman.
Jennifer Horn, thanks so much for joining us, the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party. And to our viewers, thanks very much for watching. We're standing by once again for the first polls to close in New Hampshire in just about an hour. And our special coverage of the New Hampshire primary will continue right now.